broken system chained and tangled up in lies. Voices shouting, screaming in defeat. Politicians playing games under darkened skies. Hope lost in the dust of the street. Red and blue, colors pouring from the sky. Debates turn to anger, the crowd gets loud. Punches flying in the blink of an eye. Truth buried deep beneath the shroud. Welcome to the bullpen, where the weak will survive. These broken dreams we defend, trying to keep alive. Faces on the screen, flashing perfect teeth. But behind those eyes, just rotting greed. Politicians turn to whispers beneath. They all just get what they need. Whispering conspiracies, drowning in their lies. Echoes of freedom, lost in cries. Spin the wheel of fate, let's see who rise. But this game will bleed you dry. Welcome to the bullpen, where the weak will survive. These broken dreams we defend, trying to keep alive. Welcome to the bullpen, where the weak will survive. These broken dreams we defend, trying to keep alive.
Well, good morning. It's another, afternoon in some places, including where little Chad is. But yeah, it's another Sunday, another episode of the Bullpen. It says episode number 39, but I went back through it last night, and I think the numbers got jumbled up quite a few times, probably because I'm doing the setting up of the show at like 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday nights after having bourbon during bourbon and boarding. So I don't think the numbers are actually correct there. So we'll have to go renumber them at some point. But little Chad, it's your anniversary. How's your day going so far?
Oh, it's pretty good. I don't have to worry about my wife being removed from the country under the Aliens Act of 1798.
That's
So
good.
that's always good. I married a bona fide American citizen, even though she was born in England, but it's fine. She was born a U.S. service member, so it's allowed. We
We'll
have a
we'll allow it.
defined
Yeah.
exemption for that one when they were on base in a foreign country. That's technically American territory. So,
Yep.
as we all know that. Anyway, but it's a good day. We've got a whole bunch of. I mean, may we live in interesting times. We've got. I mean, I don't think I remember the last time a healthy discussion of a legal statute passed in 1798 was the debate of the day, but here we are. Because
Yeah. It's getting weird out there. And I mean the episode I decided to name it. Two illnesses, TDS and EDS. So we'll talk about a little bit of that. I mean, here's kind of a rundown. We've got the CR got passed. There's a new Trump travel ban. There's some stock market fluctuation. The Voice of America got gutted, and that's fine.
I disagree with the name there. Yeah, so they always one thing you can count on like leftists to do, like U.S. aid sounds
Yeah,
so nice. until
Sounds
you're
like it's
like,
aiding the U.S.
yeah, until you're like CIA front group to push left wing agenda. Okay, that's a whole,
Exactly.
yeah, you can't put that into a nice name. And like Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, all these fun
Yeah.
sounding things,
Propaganda for other countries.
but they've turned into left wing agenda pushers. Like those groups, I would point out specifically, had a lot to do with swinging the presidential election in Poland from a conservative right wing government to a left wing one. They've obviously, we can see what's happening in Romania, where they have outlawed the right wing candidate from even being able to run because he won. And so they
Yep.
came up with vague allegations of Russian interference. Sound familiar? And
I
so,
have heard that somewhere before.
yeah. So all these organizations that sound, they give them these innocent and actually maybe even positive sounding names, like Bush is saying in the chat, the Inflation Reduction
Inflation
Act,
Reduction Act.
the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act has not made anything about health insurance affordable. So yeah, it's
Exactly.
like always. Gojira and I seem to be on the same wavelength. He's
And the
pulling,
Inflation Reduction Act was just the Green New
yep,
Deal,
exactly. They just couldn't
which
pass
they
it back.
also didn't accomplish anything with,
I
except
mean,
for more inflation.
it gave Stacey Abrams and a lot of organizations like that billions of dollars to play with.
Just $2
So
billion. No
just
big deal,
two,
right?
just two. That's nothing.
Yeah.
Now,
Remember when billions used to seem like a lot
bear in
in this
mind,
country?
remember the entire first term of Trump, they told you that 10 billion total to build a wall on the entire southern border of the United States was too much money.
I thought he was only asking for like 6 billion back then.
Well, yeah, he said he could do it for 6, but they always said it was going to cost 10. And so even 10 billion was too much, but we're comfortable with giving 2 billion to Stacey Abrams to buy appliances for people.
Yes, to buy votes.
Yep.
So what else do we got? We've got the auto pen controversy. We've got Trump getting a face full of microphone. I don't know if you saw that clip, but
No, I
that
didn't
was
see that.
yeah. So he's standing there talking to somebody. They're on like the tarmac, and suddenly a microphone comes into screen and just bonks him in the face, and he's just like, "What the hell?" I mean, good thing it wasn't covered in something that could have been detrimental to his health, because their Secret Service is letting a lot of people get close and do stuff like that. So, Elise Slotkin says that none of the people on the right's brains have fully developed, and as a country, we're just a bunch of teenagers.
Can we also unpack that comment and how dumbass she sounds, considering they're the same party advocating for 10-year-olds to be able to consent to mutilating their bodies?
Yeah, we can start there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Elise Slotkin, I believe, senator from Minnesota, if I'm remembering
CIA
correct.
analyst.
Former CIA, yeah.
Oh, they're never former. They're always in for
Oh,
life.
yeah. And she
Once you're a
she was
CIA
one that
asset,
grilled
you're always
Hegseth
a
pretty
CIA asset.
ridiculously. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, that mega cut of the like unhinged women senators like yelling at him while he's just sitting there kind of taking it is still classic.
she was less unhinged, but far more like just nasty to him.
Yep. I mean,
Like it wasn't her screaming her head off like everybody else. She's basically just trying to undermine him at every point during her interview with him.
I mean, she wasn't as quality in the commentary as our illustrious senator from Hawaii,
Hirono.
Hirona. Hey,
Man,
Mr.
that woman is dumb.
Mr. Hegseth, did you know I made Boom Boom this morning? That clip was great.
I even
But-
did it in the potty.
Okay.
Yeah, so Elise Slotkin goes on, I believe it was on The View.
Yes, it was The View where she said that statement.
And she comes out and basically says, well, we're entering, 250th year of the U.S. existing. So the U.S. is basically just a teenager that is, testing things, and, their brains aren't fully developed. And that's how you get somebody like Trump. So ultimately, once again, some idiot Democrat comes out and says that half the country doesn't have developed brains
Hmm.
and is just a bunch of deplorables. So yeah, I mean, if you really listen to her, like you were saying, it is one of those situations where it's like everybody on the left keeps telling us that kids can make their own choices after what the age of 13. You're not allowed to
Not
know
even the
any of
age of
their
13.
health
They're
history as
pushing
far
it
as
back. I saw there's a field trip guidance form going out. It's from New Jersey where they're sending, I think, middle schoolers, like sixth graders, to a gender legal center, and they're not allowing adult chaperones, family members, parents to be chaperones on this field trip.
of course, because at this point
They want
it's
unfettered
let us
access.
indoctrinate your kids while you aren't allowed to know anything about it.
This is why every day I'm so happy that we decided to homeschool our son. It's such a great decision. Like, number one, the amount of time you need to spend on schooling if you homeschool is ridiculously little. Like, especially in the elementary school section.
Yeah.
My wife probably spends maybe an hour or two on like school subjects a day, and he scores way higher. We do the standardized testing to actually make sure he's accurately moving
That you're
forward.
teaching to the test.
And he is scoring like he's in, like we did it last year when he was in third grade, quote unquote, and he was scoring like his scores on math were the lowest of like his group, and he was scoring eighth and ninth grade equivalent.
Yeah.
On the actual like language and grammar, he was like the equivalent of public school kids that are in 10th and 11th grade.
That's
It's really,
pretty
and I
good.
was I was like, well, I don't know. I told my wife, I was like, I don't know whether that's that you guys are doing great and he's super smart, or that's an indictment of the public school system, that
It's an indictment of the
when
public school
when you
system.
do the standardized testing, this is the equivalent, like kids at that grade level are the equivalent of his skill set.
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, it is the public school system is failing, and it is when somebody is actually teaching their own child, and their child is eager to learn, or you um, make it a make your curriculum fun and make it easier to learn. Then, I mean, obviously, you're going to do better.
I will
A
also
lot of
say,
homeschool kids excel over
if
anybody
you
going
are
to even private school.
if you are the parent of boys, homeschooling is 100% a better scenario, because especially the teachers unions and the teaching profession in general, the professional teaching profession as a whole, have designed the public school system to be anti boy, in that, in like especially elementary school, boys have lots of energy. They need to
Yeah,
have they need to
fidgeting
have
is
phys-
automatically we need to start medicating them.
Yes, they want to put him. They want my younger brother, when he was in third grade. They said he was just an active ball of energy kind of kid. They were like, the teacher brought in my mom and dad and was trying to get them, and this was in the early '90s. They were like, you need to start looking at Ritalin or ADHD medicine. I was
Well, it
like, you,
felt like
yeah,
the 90s was when they started sticking everybody on Ritalin.
yeah. My mom was like, why? And the teacher was like, he won't sit still. She's like, he's a little boy. That's what little boys do. She's like, well, I have to teach, and I have
Okay.
to teach a whole class. And so he's being disruptive. So you should really look at maybe taking him and getting him on medication. Number one, bitch, you are not a like licensed medical doctor. You can't be making diagnoses. Number two, your diagnosis was based on just wanting to make things easier for you.
Yeah.
And but like you said, Brahma, and I think we were all kind of in that era when we were younger, like we started seeing how they were pushing kids into getting medicated to shut them up and make them compliant.
Yeah.
And
There
it's
were, out of my class of 100, there were probably 30 guys that had been put on Ritalin by middle school.
Yeah, and then the kids who didn't really need it started turning around and, you know, making income from it. So there was that
Right.
component too, so that you could help the Jesse Spanos of the world feel so excited. So,
So excited. She just can't hide it.
but it's like, so yeah, but what I was like, they will try to, like, the entire system is designed to kind of work to a feminized education type, which is troublesome, I think, for the male young boys. I mean, for education, they take PE out of schools first, deeming it unnecessary.
Get rid of shop.
They get rid of shop classes. They do a lot of the stuff where they take that kind of thing out. But when you're homeschooling a kid, like, if my son's having a very active day, my wife immediately can call an audible and be like, "We're going to the park for an hour or two. We're just going to let you run around and burn off that energy, and we'll just do the school in the afternoon." you
Yeah, I
know?
had a teacher in 5th grade. I went to a private school. So I had a teacher in 5th grade who would, you know, if things were getting out of hand a little bit with certain people in the class, and we would just add another 15-minute recess just to get some of the energy, spent. So, I mean, that's one way you could handle it.
Yeah. So instead, what they've done, and I kind of, and this kind of goes back to Slotkin, this whole group, the Randy Weingards, the Slotkins, and all this, they they can acknowledge the science that says a brain isn't fully developed to the early 20s for terms of
Right.
decision making. But because it suits all their other agenda needs, they will push and be fine with kids making these medical decisions for themselves without
Life
parental
altering
involvement,
decisions.
life altering decisions. Because again, by putting you put boys on hormone blockers, guess what it makes them in school? Super placid and compliant.
Docile.
It makes them it put it in terms of hormones, it starts pushing feminine hormones, which makes them behave more like girls, even though they're not. It makes them behave more. And then once they hit
Then you get that
puberty,
then you get that elevated level of estrogen in all the food.
yeah. But it turns the frogs gay. We know that.
Turning the freaking frogs gay.
But this is why I mean, we're seeing this more with a lot of these people who are having violent outbursts. I think, these are quote unquote puberty blockers. When you hormonally imbalance somebody for years, there's going to be permanent damage to brain chemistry that's going to probably make them more prone to violent outbursts, mood swings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I
Well,
don't
and
think
on
it.
the girls' side of things, it wasn't Ritalin. It was somebody in the chat mentioned it, but it's already gone up a little bit. So on the girls' side of things, it was like you hit 11 or 12, and it's like, all right, let's get you on birth control. Jaffo said it.
Yep.
Let's
And
get you on birth control immediately.
hormonal birth control is one of the most damaging public health things. That, I mean, you can't really talk about it because people don't, they just assume, and they make it, the assumption of the baseline is that it was a good thing when it's done nothing. But I think there's one of the reasons there's been this giant upswing in cancers in younger women
Yeah.
is probably going to be, eventually they'll be able to link it back to the, I mean, I think they probably already have, but the studies, I'm sure, get buried.
Well, and there have been studies and anecdotal evidence in the last year or so that it literally is rewiring the brain in a way,
Well,
because
have you done
women were saying that while they were on birth control, they were attracted to a certain type of male, and then when they would get married, and then as soon as they were off birth control trying to have a baby, they were no longer attracted to their spouse because it was a completely different wiring of the brain without those
yeah,
extra.
there's a really amazing study. It ties into the sense of smell within women, and it was interesting. So they did this experiment, and where they had men sight unseen from the women just basically go and do a really intense workout, and then they took the shirt like that those males had been wearing, put it in like to a Ziploc, so it's basically trapping the scent after they were
Preserving it. Yeah.
perspiring. And they had groups of women smell like this group, these shirts, and rate which male they thought sight unseen that would be most attractive.
Right.
And 80% of women rated like the same males attract like as the ones who would be attractive. And so the scientists started looking for why this group of 20% seemed to have whole different like variations. And what they found was the common difference was that the women in that 20% group were on hormonal birth control.
Interesting.
So it like complete like in terms of pheromone response, where women are sensing subconsciously desirable traits for them genetically, like uh, that they were rewired by the hormonal birth control to like you said, find other people more attractive subconsciously. And that gets into like one of the things where you were talking about where women will go off birth control and suddenly not be attracted to husbands. One of the things, if you go in the anecdotal like comments, is I started noticing that I couldn't even be around him because I thought he's like the smell just killed me. Like I just couldn't be around. I couldn't
All
smell him.
sexual desire was
It
gone.
went away. And it was because yeah, I mean, yeah, Eric, it might be a gross experiment, but it gets into the fact that we are programmed. um
Pheromones do exist.
I feel like this, and to get people, I'm Christian, and I feel like this is completely congruent with Christian values in that our creator built us to be able to seek out mates that are optimum for us and the species to continue to propagate things, and hormonal birth control is an affront to the grand design and screws things up. So um if you're a child of a daughter, you're kind of weighing the facts, because on the other hand, you've got a society that is constantly pushing sexualized imagery, trying to push these girls into being sexual at a younger and younger age.
Right.
And part of you is like, if I can just could I was like, I don't want to put them on birth control, but I also don't want them to deal with unwanted pregnancy because of society pressuring them, et cetera, et cetera. So the society is putting you into a Kobayashi Maru, where you're feeling like, even though you know the dangers of hormonal birth control, you worry the immediate negative consequences to your daughter's
Right.
life are worse than possible negative consequences because of the hormone issue. And I think for a lot of people, it's this. In a lot of ways, it's a lot like the shot that everybody had to get. Like
Yeah.
they guilt you, they
You're
make
damned
you
if you do,
feel,
you're damned
yeah,
if you
they make you
don't
feel
in
like
most people's
this,
mind.
yeah, the societal consequences of not following what they tell you is the right choice. They're making you feel like you're no win. Like I had to take it. I didn't want to because I couldn't even get job interviews in Virginia at the time when I was
I'm still pure
unemployed.
blood.
Yeah. My wife and son still are. I'm not letting them go near it. If
That was the joy of being self-employed.
yeah, if something's gonna happen, I've made sure I'm very well insured, so they'll be taken care of. Obviously, it'll be terrible, and I know there's going to be negative consequences. But from a financial standpoint, me being the only one who's had to put myself into the grand experiment is something. At least I've made sure that it'll be all right if that goes financially.
So does
It
your family work the same way that mine does with plenty of
if
life insurance? Every time I get on a plane, I have
with
to text out to everybody that I landed to make them sad that they're not getting paid that day.
with the extra optional insurance I've got from my workplace, if I was ever on a business trip with the AD&D plus the life insurance plus my other regular life insurance, I think it's business travel where I'm decapitated, but they find the body is like is the trifecta multiplier
Right.
to get them, like the most payout. Not to
Yeah.
mention whatever they'd get from the airline, I'm sure, if something terrible happens.
I don't have the death and dismemberment or accidental. I've just got straight life insurance because, well, I sell it. So, but before we get too far in. I realize we're already at 25 minutes, but I would like to thank Vex Electronica for sending some of her chat over here this morning. It's good to see you guys. And yeah, we got a lot of familiar faces in the chat today. So thank you all for being here.
All right. Well, I do want to share an interesting piece of polling
Okay.
as we
About
it's
the Democrats' historic
no,
polling.
this is more for positive for Trump, and it's coming from Meet the Press, which is NBC, and it's got to pain them when they have to say this kind of stuff. So here we go.
First of all, the mood of the country. This really jumped out. We asked folks, is it on the right direction or the wrong direction? That 44%, you say right direction, that's up since November. And if that doesn't seem like a lot, the last time it cracked 40%, you got to go back to 2012. The last time it actually hit 44 or higher, January of 2004. So a lot of this is
January. So this right track number hasn't been this high for 21 years.
Yeah. And it's
it
crazy
jumped.
because 2004 doesn't seem like that far back, but then when you actually do the math, it's like, wow, it's been a while.
And to give people a refresher of where 2004 was, it was before Iraq degenerated into a complete nightmare.
Right.
So people were still positive about what was going on there. That was kind of right around mission accomplished phase.
Yeah, it was the year my daughter was born, so it's been her whole life. The country has not been considered on the right direction.
It was before Katrina kind of destroyed the confidence in the government response led by Bush. It was before
just a few years after 9/11.
Before the financial crisis destroyed, the next level of your economic feelings of well-being. So, and this is all right. So it's 44% now, and just to kind of give people a reminder, like gas prices are cratering because oil is moving down so efficiently. I think we haven't had gas prices as low as they are averaging in the U.S. since 2021.
Right, which is
the last.
I mean, also kind of tied into some of the stock market drops. It's tied into the interest rates, and with gas going down, I mean, we're going to start seeing some of the consumer goods coming down too.
Well, I think this is something where people are they're trying to go after Trump because the market had a bad week. It was down,
but the market has to correct at some point.
But that's what's going to happen is a lot of these companies and corporations, their profit metric is based on low cost foreign manufacturing. And so the people looking at them from a stock market standpoint, when they say that Trump's tariff policy is causing them problems, the real translation is Trump is going to make it so we have less profit margin on the goods we import to sell in the United States. That doesn't mean it's bad for the American worker, because when they start reshoring jobs and paying American workers standard American level wages, their profit levels will go down. And that's fine, because companies don't need to make $20 billion a quarter like Apple for the American worker to do well. Like if Apple's profits drop to $8 billion a quarter,
they're still making $8 billion a quarter.
I will tell you, Apple stock will go down. Apple will lose market cap because people who are buying the stock will feel like there's less cash coming in. But American workers will now be manufacturing iPhones. We're making probably anywhere from $20 to $30 an hour doing it. They will have benefits, insurance. They'll be able to take care of their family. They won't have to buy from that god-awful insurance marketplace. There's all the net positives for the average American and American worker do not necessarily correlate to the net positive for a company's stock value.
Right. Because remember, even during the last 4 years, while the total economy was tanking and inflation was just skyrocketing and interest rates were skyrocketing, the market was on record levels the whole time.
Yeah.
Because the market doesn't really care what the economy is doing.
which is why I think we need to start kind of
We need to untie
reorienting.
thinking about
Yes,
the market as the overall economy, because it's not the economy. It can show some healthy aspects of the economy or unhealthy aspects, but it is not the end all be all to our economy.
which is, and that's what Trump has been talking about when he was saying the Biden used to try to brag that he was going to rebuild the economy from the middle out. Well, that lying auto pen piece of crap was saying what Trump is actually doing, which is he is reshoring, and it's going to make the worker in the United States have more power than they did before. I think Trump is not going to stand in the way of people unionizing in the America. Like, he's not going to, if it's a private union, like with auto manufacturing, whatever, he's not going to get in the way of that. Because yeah, if the American worker uses their leverage to now get better pay, good for them.
And
And that's
remember,
a
a tariff can't hurt you if you've got a U.S. alternative to buy, because there are no tariffs on the U.S. alternatives. So it's going to automatically be lower in cost than something that's being imported.
And yeah, and one of the things Trump has said repeatedly about his tax plan that's going to be hopefully in this next set of reconciliation bills they're going to work on is he's going to end carried interest as a loophole for, and that's not something for the average worker. That's something for billionaires that is going to hurt them. So, and he's always hated it because it's something where, as a real estate guy, in New York, he could see all these hedge fund people who didn't really build anything or make anything make all these obscene amounts of money and not have to pay taxes on it. The reason Trump was able to avoid paying taxes some years is because he did real estate where you can depreciate the physical asset and take those depreciation dollars and apply it towards your tax bill.
And when they asked him about it, he basically said, that's the way you guys wrote the taxes. If you want to fix those loopholes, then fix them. That's what Congress is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Did they do anything? No,
No.
not really.
No, because real estate, you need to be able to depreciate real estate. There'd be no real estate market for renting if you couldn't depreciate the asset, because your asset does require that, because it maintaining a
You have to
property
reinvest
costs
money
money.
back into property.
So you have to be able to recognize that through depreciation, like that your asset requires maintenance, upkeep, and isn't the same amount of, like, what your initial investment was gets recouped that way.
I mean, a simple way to look at it is you buy a brand new vehicle and you lose what, $3,000, $4,000 value just by taking it off the lot. It's
Mhm.
already depreciated that much. You're already in the negative on your equity on that vehicle. Same thing happens with a house. Except the housing market can also fluctuate that and make it worth more, but your dollar is worth less due to inflation and the market. I mean, it's all intricately tied together. I am interested in, he's been announcing for the past week he wants to basically eliminate income tax, federal income tax on anybody making 150,000 or less. I'm interested in how he would go about implementing that.
The only way to do it is and this is the problem with reconciliation. Once it hits the Senate process,
Yeah.
in order to bypass the 60 votes needed for cloture to avoid a filibuster, reconciliation has to be triggered, and reconciliation has rules where
Has
it
to be
has to be
balanced.
revenue neutral, or you either need to end up taking more revenue in, or it has to be neutral with what you're doing versus what it would be otherwise.
Right.
And so
And
that's
part of the problem with that is every economist that the Congress tends to use to decide whether it's, a net loss or a net gain never believes in any Republican ideals of how taxes actually work. So
so
if
that's
you
the
cut
process.
taxes, even though it will infuse the economy, they consider that a net loss that has to be balanced by cutting something else.
So the phrase you'll hear if they start getting into the weeds, it's what's called dynamic scoring of the bill.
Yep.
So the Congressional Budget Office has to score, meaning rate, or put a dollar amount on the bill for the Senate parliamentarian to sign off and say that it's allowed under reconciliation. And the Congressional Budget Office uses what's called static scoring, where they just look at it without anticipating increased growth or economic activity as a result of people having more money. That's what's called dynamic scoring, where and this is what Republicans will always say, like when we cut taxes, we don't end up generating less revenue for the Treasury. We end up generating more because more business activity happens. So more income taxes are paid, more business
Reinvestment.
taxes are paid, more payroll taxes are paid, and those things go into the Treasury. So there's never been a major tax cut from whether it's JFK, Ronald Reagan, or Trump, where the revenue number to the Treasury went down after the tax cut.
Right.
Now, the reason the deficits may have gone up is because we don't ever cut spending along with the tax cuts. But that's where the dynamic scoring part
That's
comes
where
in.
Doge is coming in
Yeah.
to make cuts that will be balancing out the. I mean, they're already looking ahead at how this is going to work, because if you do the Doge cuts, you are actually cutting finally, and then even with the congressional scoring, you can have the tax cuts and making changes there.
Now, the idea of making a certain level of income tax free is actually already built into our system. I think it's the first $10,000 of income has no federal taxes applied to it.
On
And
a
then,
joint, like married joint, I think it's something like 23,000,
yeah, when you do married, it usually roughly doubles.
and then you've got the child tax credit
Yeah.
if you've got children.
Yeah. So we've got, we've already got that built into our system. Now, what Trump is talking about, like you're saying, Brahma, is increasing that baseline no taxes level to 150 grand for the household.
Right.
That's, so will that impact a lot of taxpayers? A lot, yeah, a lot.
It'll
But
impact a lot of middle class. It won't impact a lot of low income, because
they're
they're
already
already
not
for the
paying.
most part not paying anything.
So, as an
Um,
example, like we already right now. So, when you talk about like, oh, that's going to be a lot of money, it depends on how they play with it. Because if you're somebody who makes $80,000 to $90,000 a year, but you're married and have children, you get standard deductions that you can take for yourself, your spouse, and your children that immediately come off of your taxable income. And the standard deduction for a married couple in 2024 was almost $28,000. So immediately, if your baseline income is like 80, you get 28,000 that comes down. So now the federal taxable income is only 52, and that's before we start taking off for children that you might have.
right.
And then we can apply the
It's your
child tax
adjusted
credit.
gross. Yeah.
So even though we've got people who make 80 to 90 grand as a household, where by the time all said and done, depending on the number of kids they have, they could effectively, again, not even be paying federal income tax on an income of 80,000 plus in the household.
Right. That's where you're getting your refund from
Yep.
a large chunk that you paid in during the year. I guess what I'm interested in a little bit is, like, are we going to reset the brackets, or would it still be like somebody, if you were paying 140, or if you were making 145,000, you've got no taxes is what he's proposing. But if you hit 150, are you then paying the current 150 bracket, or are they going to adjust the brackets to where it's not as painful just to make that extra
Well,
$5,000?
the way they
We've
do,
seen people in the past just, I don't want to work extra because then I go into that next tax bracket and I get, I actually have to start paying taxes
well, remember
versus
the way tax
getting everything
brackets
back.
work is you only pay that rate on the dollars over the amount from the previous bracket. So if the
Right.
150 tax bracket is 25%,
It's somewhere
rough,
around there. It's like
yeah,
23 to 25. Yeah.
yeah. So if you make $155,000, you'd be paying 5% on $5,000. I mean 25%. So your taxes at that point would be $1,250. on the
Right.
5,000.
So I think Slender's describing it well. So the first 150 just would be
Yeah.
untaxed.
Yeah, and then for anything over that, you'd move into the bracket, but it wouldn't be, yeah. So the 150 and below stays untaxed, because that's
Right.
the way current tax
So it's not
bracket
like you
works.
just suddenly get hit with, okay, I made 150, so now I'm getting 25% on all 150
Yeah.
that you made.
So
That kind of thing.
if you're making 150,000 right now, your income is subject to probably like 3 or 4 tax brackets, because the way it works is the first, I think, whatever amount of dollars has zero. Then from like 11,000 to 44 or 45,000, it's this tax bracket. Then for every dollar you make between 45 and 80, it's this tax bracket. And then 80 plus, like the way the brackets work is the amount of your tax rate for that bracket zone is applied to the dollars you make within that zone. So you're paying only, you're going to pay lower tax rate on the dollars before that. You'll pay a tax rate on those dollars, and you'll pay a higher tax rate on the dollars above it. So that's why if you ever do your taxes, like if you use TurboTax or something, they'll give you at the very end what's called your effective tax rate,
Effective.
which is
Yeah.
when you combine all the different brackets you're subject to after all your deductions. This is how much your actual effective tax rate was on the money you earned gross
Right.
before any of the adjustments. There's a reason accountants exist as a profession, and because they make this complicated on purpose, so that
Yeah. The tax code is ridiculous and huge.
yeah. So it's it's very interesting the way we do that, because I still think that the accountants are a very underrated lobbying group to push to keep the tax code kind of Byzantine, so they can maintain the need to have corporate accounting, to make sure they have the need to have personal accountants for your taxes.
Yeah.
It employs, there's a lot of people who work in the accounting profession, yours truly included. So it's it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah. To me, it's just always felt like those, the very lowest tax brackets are meant to try to grow people into the middle class, but it's always felt like the tax brackets from like 130,000 to about what 250,000 feel like they very much keep people locked into the middle class.
I know it's that's again where carried interest comes in. Carried interest is a way to for rich people to stay rich,
Right.
because
Until you can start playing with some of those
yeah.
loopholes and those games, the taxes are very punishing for the middle class.
So one of the ways, like say you're a very wealthy person who doesn't make an income, right? Warren Buffett comes to mind. I've used this example before, where he'll go out and do interviews where he says it's wrong for my secretary to pay a higher
To pay more
tax rate.
taxes. Yeah.
That's because Warren Buffett pays himself like a salary of $1 as
Right.
the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, and he pays his secretary $300,000 a year. But do you think Warren Buffett gets more money or less money by the end of the year than his secretary? I guarantee you it's more, but the way he does it is through dividends, earnings on stock payment, and stock options as the CEO, like
Realized gains.
realized gains on, and then carried interest, because he'll take those gains and the interest on it and he'll carry it over into other things. So, and what they'll do is they'll get bank loans for income to pay for things against their assets. And then when they pay those bank loans, they don't have income taxes based on, because a loan is an income. That's how you can get liquidity without generating taxable income. And
Yep.
and the dividend tax rate is only 20%. Which it should be. I want to encourage investment, so you don't want to make the tax rate on dividends and earnings from investing in business a problem. Now we should start making it like, and this is something that Trump's also proposed. He wants to make those lower tax rates for things tied to employing and building manufacturing and operating in the United States. versus having a multinational conglomerate where if you want to make less, if you want to pay less taxes, you're going to only pay it less on the things that you're doing here in the US. Outside of the US, you're paying tariffs and you're going to pay other things as a result. um, I see Eric saying that he would like dividends taxed higher rate than labor, but that's a problem because you want to make sure that the people who have money have an incentive to invest it to earn. And I know that it sounds weird, but in a lot of ways, having capital flow is more important than having access to labor, because without the access to capital, labor doesn't get to do its part. So you need to make sure in a fully operational capitalist system, capital flows from investors is super important.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it right, it's not going to be a thing where the people are taking advantage of it the wrong way and doing, there's ways to make it so that it actually works. I mean, when we had the really, really high capital gains tax rate, investment and business growth in the United States super stagnated. So you can see that we've got historical analogs to see why it's a bad idea to tax dividends and gains, capital gains at that kind of rate.
Yep. We missed one earlier, so I went back and found it. Using the membership chat, Jeremiah Hembry. Trump needs to do something about these rogue judges. They have no authority and no power to go against him.
Well, I want to share something that ties in that as we go into our discussion.
I thought
about
you
that.
might,
because this is from the president of Ecuador or El Salvador. Yeah, which is where the planes were being flown when the rogue judge yesterday tried to order them mid flight to come back. Which was, and here's the headline: Federal judge orders deportation flights carrying alleged Venezuelan gangbangers to return to U.S. Blocks Trump from invoking Alien Enemies Act. And his tweet was, oopsie, too late. Because, as you can see from this one earlier, here's the plane landing and being unloaded for those guys to be sent right to that very world-renowned open-air prison that they run in El Salvador, which is how they solved their MS-13 problem. And
Yep.
Look, don't these guys just look like the most gentle souls, being just, clearly not, evil people with face. Here's the thing, by the way, face tattoos, not a fan. I don't know why they're getting popular. My automatic reaction always will be that if you have face tattoos, you're not somebody I want my kids around.
Degenerate.
Yeah.
The degens.
All right, so here's funny is this is his statement. Like, today, the first 238 members of the Venezuelan criminal organization Trend
Argua.
By the way, who makes their net U.S. You know where their U.S. headquarters is, Rama?
I do not.
Denver. Because
well, I mean,
they scouted it and
they were the ones that were taking over portions of Aurora.
Apparently, they determined that Denver was the best, most convenient, good place for them to operate with the sanctuary policies and everything else.
Yeah, Jared Polis was making statements about stuff yesterday that most Coloradans were just like, "You're full of shit."
So they were immediately transferred to the CCOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center, for a period of 1 year, which is renewable. The United States will pay a very low fee for them, but a high one for us. So it's going to cost us way less than our normal incarceration cost. But for El Salvador, it's going to be a really good earnings opportunity for them. Over time, these actions, combined with the production already being generated by more than 40,000 inmates engaged in various workshops and labor under the Zero Idleness program, will help make our prison system self-sustainable. As of today, it costs us $200 million a year. So they're looking at this as a business opportunity to grow production for El Salvador. So this is going to be a great, it's a win-win. It's helping foreign policy, right? I like, here, Gojira, finally an outsourcing plan I can get behind.
Yeah.
Um, on this occasion, the U.S. has also sent us 23 MS-13 members wanted by Salvadorian justice, including 2 ringleaders. One of them is a member of the criminal organization's highest structure. This will help us finalize intelligence gathering, go after the last remnants of MS-13, including its former and new members' money, weapons, drugs, hideouts, collaborators, and sponsors. As always, we continue advancing in the fight against organized crime, but this time we are also helping our allies, making our prison system self-sustainable and obtaining vital intelligence. Here, I'm just
Well,
gonna
it's that on top of,
look at this. This is
when Trump was initially doing the tariffs on Mexico, they started turning over cartel leaders left and right.
yeah, and here's their this is them getting processed into the prison. You can see that El Salvador is probably a little more, how do I put this,
Slightly
capable
rough.
capable than the American system might be for getting these people processed quickly.
Yeah, they're not coddling them like they're children. They're treating them like criminals.
I mean, do you imagine like the ACLU like shit fit if this was happening on US soil? Like he's actually got
Well,
the nightstick out to like herd them into their jail cells.
I think we've seen the ACLU's response with everything on with Guantanamo over the years.
Oh, here's Secretary Marco Rubio. Thank you for your assistance and friendship. So, by the way, man, Marco Rubio, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Marco Rubio might be the most, in terms of like, how do I put this? Like, surprisingly good cabinet pick. I knew he would do
Yeah,
pretty
he's
well, but he has been like on fire as the secretary with the amount of shit he's had to do. Where he's dismantled from, like, we started strong with USAID, where he was super good on doing that. We're actually invoking this Alien Enemies Act. I mean,
yeah
he's been
the
awesome.
his explanation on deporting the uh, rabble rouser from Colombia. um, that was, I mean, he did a great job of explaining it. I mean, to get into the country on a student visa, they're going to ask you questions. To get a green card, they're going to ask you questions. If the answer to those questions at the time would have been, yes, I'm here to try to get more support for Hamas and the Palestinians. And if that was your answer, you probably wouldn't have ever gotten the student visa or the green card. So there's nothing that I mean, a green card is not citizenship. They are still subject to rules. So Rubio's statement was essentially, I mean, now that we do know that that's why you're here, yeah, we're going to take away your green card and send you back where you came from. We don't need people like that in our country. And he did a fairly great response to the media on that one because everybody, you know, Twitter and everything, all the media has gone absolutely nuts on this case of, well, you can't, this is a free speech issue. When you're on a green card or a student visa, you don't have unlimited free speech. It's not a U.S. citizen. Did we
Yeah,
lose you, Chad?
no,
Okay,
I
there
was
you go.
letting you go.
Okay.
I like to let you speak too when you have thoughts, bro.
No, I don't have thoughts.
But I mean, that's something that has been, I think, lost. Like when you apply to be here on a visa and then become a lawful permanent resident, you get, like, the visa gives you certain privileges, and I mean, using that word very specifically, you have a privilege isn't a right. You don't have First Amendment rights when you're here on a visa. And even as a lawful permanent resident, you still get privileges, not rights.
Right.
Now, the ACLU will argue that a lawful permanent resident has access to rights under the Constitution. In certain scenarios, that would be true, whereas a lawful permanent resident does get protections against, like, illegal search and seizure. You can't, there would be, Fourth Amendment rights against that. But at the same time, even those would still even apply to visa holders because that is such a broad scope kind of thing. Now, First Amendment rights specifically, the reason, even though those would generally apply to people who are still just here in the US, even on a visa under a privilege thing, we have legally put rules in for visas that we grant and for lawful permanent residents around the kind of speech and actions they can engage in that they are allowed to until they become a full
A
United States
full-fledged
citizen.
Yeah.
Those rights are not fully vested, so to speak. So you are still in a privileged state, which means that you have certain restrictions.
Consider it probation.
Yeah, you're on like a probationary period. And as Slender's talking about, do you now or have ever expressed support for a terrorist organization? That's one of the caveats, right? And we put in the law. This was passed by Congress. This isn't some executive order. This was legally passed by Congress that gave the Secretary of State discretion for both visa holders and lawful permanent residents, which is basically called green card holders, where if you are a danger to national security, have ties to any kind of terrorist organization, you can be immediately deported. It can your residency green card, your legal permanent resident status can be revoked, your visa can be revoked. You don't have a right in those circumstances. And I think the way that it was even passed by law, you don't even have a right to be able to usually go to court and challenge it. It is at the discretion of the Secretary of State as the person who oversees entry into our country from foreign nationals. You you say the wrong thing, you have the ties to the wrong people, you're gone. You get to go out. Now, this is another circumstance where a district court judge is making terribly wrong rulings,
Trying to handcuff the executive again.
But this is ties into our conversation last week and kind of where we'll go here. Like, these district court judges are making these terrible rulings on jurisprudence because they are very activist, and we know it. But these are only temporary setbacks. Like, every single time it goes to a higher level court, these district court judges are getting destroyed by the appeals level.
Down.
Like, as we were talking about before the show started, on Friday, it might have been Saturday, but in the last couple of days, the decision on the DEI restrictions, like where Trump's executive orders to remove DEI and to ban contractors from using DEI and all that, we know that there was a district court judge who did a nationwide injunction against it, saying that no federal government representative, officer, cabinet secretary, nobody could remove DEI, stop it, whatever.
Right.
It went to the 4th District Court of Appeals, which is a liberal district court, which is a liberal court of appeals. It's Maryland. And they ruled 3-0 with 2 Democratic judges in this 3-judge panel. They ruled 3-0, saying we are staying that decision because the government government is going to win this case. So we're staying it. The Trump administration can move forward. You can still do your trial on the merits to come to a decision, but we're not allowing you to keep the Trump administration from doing it. So they're allowed to move forward with the DEI executive orders. Yep. And they'll let the little district judge do his case, and he'll be able to reach a decision. And as soon as that decision is reached, if he rules against Trump, it'll go right up to that same Court of Appeals, who is likely in another 3-judge panel to rule 3-0 that the executive, and the president has the right to do this. Sorry, you're done. It's done.
And then at some point, the appeals courts and the Supreme Court are just going to start, really smacking them down and using some language that's like, yeah, stop wasting everybody's time.
Well, I think that's going to come
You're
from
getting smacked down over and over and over. Stop wasting everybody's time.
The Trump administration has done an appeal to the Supreme Court on the birthright citizenship ban.
Right.
And I think it's no mistake that they've decided that's the one they want to jump the line for. And what they're doing is they are appealing the idea of nationwide injunctions against the executive for plenary powers. And number one, I mean, if they can get the win on birthright citizenship right now, they'll be happy. But what they're at the minimum they're seeking is that if a judge does a restraining order or an injunction, it only applies to the parties involved specifically, not nationwide, and it only becomes binding in the state that they are a district court judge for. So
Right.
like this one is out of Washington state. Fine, you grant an injunction, we are enjoined in Washington state. We won't be able to do it in Washington state. So that's the minimum they're asking for from Roberts. And I think that's what Roberts is like, seeing some of these other crazy decisions that are happening. This is where Roberts may finally say, what we're going to do is
Waiting on the right case to do it.
we're not going to keep judges from trying cases and hearing the facts and developing a case, history that we can review as an appellate court. But what we are going to do is restrict the injunction and say that properly, as a district court judge, as an inferior court, and as an inferior part of the judicial branch to the presidency, your ability to enjoin or restrict is only allowed to specific zone that you operate in and parties involved in the case.
Which would gut the ability for a district judge to just stop anything from happening across the country that they don't like.
Yep.
Gojira said, I've seen it floated that some of this was not only expected but intended as a way to force the Supreme Court to rule. From the very beginning of Trump's presidency, we said the birthright citizenship was literally to get them to make a ruling on it. It was he knew the executive order was not going to just stand on its own. He had to get a ruling from the Supreme Court.
The last Supreme Court case on this was from the 1890s and only dealt with the child of two legal permanent residents, where the Supreme Court ruling was yes, because the parents are both legal permanent residents and are therefore now under the jurisdiction of the United States as legal permanent residents. The child of those two parents, if both legal permanent residents, would be a U.S. citizen. What that decision
Which is
in
very
no
different
way
than anchor babies and coming in on vacation from China to have a baby while you're here for a week. None of that is permanent, people here. So, yeah, I mean, we've got to get control of this because, I mean, everybody here knows, and I'm sure everybody in chat knows, you can't have a country if just anybody just becomes a citizen just because they feel like it.
No other country in the world has this kind of policy for a reason.
No, not a single country in the world does this.
No.
It goes against all common sense.
Yeah, so
which is what the left tends to do.
And it was never intended. So I think once it winds its way to the Supreme Court, I do believe we are going to get a 5-4, but most likely a 6-4 decision. Roberts, I would believe, would actually defer writing this.
6-3?
Yeah, 6-3. I think Roberts would actually defer to Gorsuch on writing this kind of opinion, because Gorsuch is very well detailed about originalist intent for legislative, action. The example of that would be when he ruled that Oklahoma still belonged to the Indians.
Right.
As weird as that
reservation.
Because that was the right legal decision, because based on the treaties that the United States signed at the time,
that were still enacted,
which have never
been changed.
Yeah, which have never been changed. That territory was ceded to him. Now, he even said in the decision, the de facto truth is that in no way are these lands operated by the Indian nations, but this is the truth of the matter. It is what it is. Legally, they should take care of those things.
Right. Basically saying, hey, legislature, This is putting the ball back in your court. This is where the law stands right now. So we have to rule this way because we don't make law from the judicial. But here's what you need to do. Fix it if you need to.
Yeah, so I think that is going to be, how it goes. And yeah, I see in chat Eric is talking about. I hope Thomas and Alito retire so Trump can, replace them since they're aging. I do believe, especially Thomas. I think what Thomas is waiting for is there's one specific case, which is Snopes versus Maryland, which is the assault weapon ban case that I believe the Supreme Court, they've been relisting it for conference now 7 times, which usually indicates that they're going to take the case and that they've either already made their decision and they're waiting to just publish it until such time as they think it's appropriate, or that they're pushing it off to the next Supreme Court term, which will be this fall. I think it's going to be this fall. I think that case is where Clarence Thomas has made a point of trying to make the Second Amendment what he calls not a second class amendment, meaning right as it is foundational, just like the first. It is a right that everybody needs to get. And I think he wants to be, for his legacy, he would be like, he took what Scalia started and he's finished establishing that the Second Amendment right is both an individual right and that the governments cannot block individuals from purchasing common use firearms, which are semi automatic rifles, in this case, assault unquote weapons. So I think he'll do that and then he'll retire and Trump will be able to replace him. I think Trump will have the ability, is going to be able to replace Thomas and Alito prior to the 2026 Senate elections. I think they'll both retire.
He may have to.
Yeah.
I mean, that the timeline for that replacement kind of has to be before the midterms.
Yeah. So I think he ends up replacing both of those, which will lock in, and he'll probably select people who are in their mid 40s, early mid 40s, which will be another 25 to 30 years on the bench.
And hopefully we can find some people that are actual replacements for Thomas and Alito, because it's going to be painful to lose those guys.
Trump, I mean, Gorsuch has been great. I think Kavanaugh, for the most part, has actually been pretty solid. I know some people in the chat may be a little more down on him, but he's like a 90% of the time makes exactly the decision we'd want. And
Yeah.
the 10% of the time where he moves in a different direction, it's usually that decision isn't as bad for the conservatives as you would think. It's those cases tend to be very narrowly based. You have to take the case as it is, right? Sometimes the facts of the case determine how you end up going.
Right.
So
Which
I
is
think
why you see the Supreme Court being selective in which cases they'll take, say, about gun rights and stuff, because you have to have the right case with the right circumstances to be able to rule the way that everybody is thinking that they're going to rule.
I see Eric talking about Will Chamberlain. Yeah, he's a good guy on Twitter. Gives good legal analysis. It's going to be a federal judge. Nobody's getting to the Supreme. Don't get your hopes up that it's going to be anybody who's not already at least a district court judge. Most likely a appellate court one. So look to people that Trump
You don't
appointed.
think he's going to make Ted Cruz?
No. Look to people that Trump appointed in his first term that have now established a case history and decision history where you can look at their opinions, read how they decide things, and go for it. There's some really good candidates too. We got St. Benitez out of California, who's a district court judge, who's the guy who's been fighting for Second Amendment rights in the heart of California, overturning their magazine bans, their handgun bans, all sorts of stuff. We got some good guys out of Illinois, and we've got some appellate court judges who are really solid too. So there's going to be good ones that we can look. And the main thing is when he nominates them, go look at the actual legal decisions they put down on paper. Don't pay attention to anything they say in the court, in the confirmation hearings. They're going to we've got the game plan now for how confirmation hearings they're going to go. They're going to say, we will respect precedent. We this, that, they're never going to give an opinion. They'll say when someone who's a senator tries to get them to give an opinion on a type of law, they're going to say, as a judge, as a justice, if confirmed, the facts of the case will guide my decision, nothing more. They're not going to
And
give. Yeah,
and the lefty senators have lost their stupid little litmus test that never should have been a litmus test on Roe v. Wade. I mean, because for decades it's always been, well, are you going to let Roe v. Wade stand? There is no litmus test that the right really has for the left. Typically, you know, if they're not complete raving lunatics, the right will vote for them or abstain from voting. The left tries to make anybody who is being appointed from the right, they try to get them on record as saying that they will not do this or they will do this. And that litmus test is gone. So it'll be interesting to watch the next confirmation now that that piece has been taken out.
exactly. And to Eric Myers in chat, yeah, there are plenty of based judges Trump appointed in his first term that are readily available. I would say that if you follow either on YouTube or on X, there's a guy Mark W. Smith. He just does the Four Boxes Diner. He's a big legal scholar when it comes to the Second Amendment, but he also goes over general cases and he'll talk about the judges who would be solid based choices because he goes over their actual decision making when it comes to the published legal opinions and why they're good or bad.
Yep. Well, let's jump because we're running out of time. Let's jump over to we touched on it, the auto pen situation with Joe
That's
Biden.
a good one.
So it turns out that outside of his letter saying that he was going to drop out of the presidential race, just about everything else that ever came across the desk was signed by AutoPen, meaning all of the pardons, all of the executive orders, damn near everything that happened in the Biden presidency, they used AutoPen for. And there are whisperings and rumors going around and some articles being written that it was a certain staffer that has, to this point, I think, remained unnamed, had control of that auto pen, and everybody lived in abject horror of dealing with that person because they were essentially running the whole presidency.
It was his chief of staff.
That's what I think.
Yep.
There's a lot of calls into question. Yeah, it calls into question whether any of those orders or pardons are actually binding at this point, because did he even know what he was doing? Do I think anything's going to come of this? Not really, but it is gathering some steam, and Trump has been hitting on it pretty heavily in the past couple days. But are any of those pardons actually legal? Because did he know who he was pardoning? And we talked about it a little bit on Wednesday night on Shag's show, and I just wanted to point everybody back to Mike Johnson saying that, remember when he was telling that story that he kept trying to get in with a one-on-one with the president, and they kept blocking him for months. Then he finally got in, and he was talking to Biden about something that had affected Johnson State. It was a executive order that Biden had signed.
I think the offshore drilling ban stuff.
I believe so. And Biden was like, I never signed that. I have no idea what you're talking about. What are you talking about? So that's just one anecdotal example of, did Biden even know what he was signing at any point? Because he never signed anything. Things just came across his desk and they just auto signed it for him. So what do you got on that?
This is one of those things where we probably all know it's happening. It did happen. That it's highly illegal and that nothing will come of it, because nobody in the executive branch who worked for Biden is going to publicly acknowledge and admit that Biden didn't quote unquote sign or
Have
those
a fully
executive orders.
functioning brain.
Yeah. So they're, I mean, look, we already saw them run interference for it before. They're at this point, they're going to use the Hillary Clinton answer for them. Their response will be, at this point, what difference does it make? Right. Like it's
Right.
what's done is done. The other thing is it will require judicial will of such that we have not seen represented anywhere in the federal judiciary, not from a Republican appointed justice, not from it's certainly not a Democrat appointed justice, not from an appellate court, not from the Supreme Court, because to move at this point and void the executive orders, the pardons, whichever thing comes, that gets brought to court to be attacked, for them to
Which at
void
this
it.
point is essentially going to be the pardons,
Yeah.
because Trump has essentially overturned almost all the executive orders anyway.
Yeah. And I don't think Trump has any will to fight the pardons either. And here's why. Because look at Trump's history. He doesn't like to live in the past, and as good as he's been this term, I don't think Trump is interested in putting people into in handcuffs and trying to bring them into jail to do it. He wants to bar people from having clearances and keep them from making money. He wants to cut off the trough for the easy, for all that stuff. What Trump isn't as interested in doing is bringing charges that aren't airtight and that aren't justified. If anybody ever gets charged, and I'm not convinced that there is anybody from the previous administrations, whether it was Obama's people who brought it in or Biden's people who are kind of the same thing. Trump doesn't try to get people brought into the court system. He just tries to cut them off.
Defangs them.
Yeah, and that's because Trump, and in a lot of ways, is still is an actual and it is kind of weird because people don't want to give him credit. He's actually also a very empathetic human being, and as bad as he responds to things, he tends to try to still respond proportionally. If the stuff with Biden where he pardoned his family, he knows they're criminals. He knows everybody knows they're criminals now. What does it gain him, and what is the positive for the country dragging him in the court now that he's cut off their money? He doesn't see it.
The other part of that is Trump also kind of knows where he sits and, the power of the presidency. And if you start challenging some of those pardons based on the auto pen thing, you may actually weaken presidential power a little bit if they're making rulings on that. What I would like to see is maybe Congress do their job and maybe pass law that outside of form letters and stuff, there's tons of form letters that come from the office of the president or the desk of the president. Mm-hmm. You can use auto pen on that, but any binding executive order or actual legal form, I think it should have to be a wet signature.
How do I put it?
We've watched Trump be able to sign.
No, I'm not saying that that's actually not a good idea. What I'm saying is that's going to get into territory where about being legally a separation of powers even though you can. I
get the separation of powers thing, but if you have question marks about who is actually running the country, I mean, it still doesn't do a whole lot because you can still force in Biden's case, I believe he could have been forced to sign just about anything.
This is where standing.
But even some of the pardons that came through, even Democrat senators and congressmen were saying, "Why the hell would this person be pardoned?" There were murderers and child molesters that were pardoned by Biden, and nobody even seemed to know, who did that or why Biden would do that. Biden didn't seem to know about it. So,
yeah,
and it's called into question a whole bunch of stuff that should never have had to be called into question because the Democrats tried to hide Biden's inability to do anything.
So the two questions would be, does the Congress have legal standing to challenge it? And the answer was probably no. because
I don't know.
like the plenary powers of the president for pardon, the Congress isn't like. I mean, you can't.
It's
What?
not
How
challenging
is?
his power to do it. It's saying that there needs to be some regulation into how the physical act of it is done. Like
That's
we need an actual signed document for anything that is happening in that way. I don't know.
it's
I
a
haven't thought
good
it through a
question.
ton. It's just it seems like the auto pen was never a thing until what
Well,
20,
yeah,
30 years ago.
I would want somebody who's got a much higher legal constitutional law background to give me kind of a primer on what's the standing issue grounds, like could from a standing point of view, could Congress put that kind of restriction on the presidency? Would it be allowed? Number two, if we wanted to challenge, like if they are not allowed to do that, what is the process for challenging what we think would be a unsigned, effectively presidential order or whatever? I would think it'd have to be somebody directly impacted and harmed, and then evidence of that document not genuinely being signed physically by the president would allow it to be overturned by the courts in the same way that any document that is found to be improperly executed. As in, like if everybody remembers during the financial crisis, some people finally decided to challenge their mortgages being called and getting foreclosed on. And when it went to court, the mortgages had been bought and sold so many times. The bank or institution that was finally foreclosing on them, these people went to court and their lawyers said, they need to produce the mortgage for us to be able to respond to it. And these banks didn't actually have the paperwork because it had moved around so much. They didn't actually have the physical mortgage
The loans just
documents.
got sold so many times. Yeah.
And so the judges actually threw it out, and then they voided it and basically said, like, these people get their house for free at this point. There's no paperwork showing a mortgage anymore. I know in the county records or titles it might say that, but you don't have any documents of it. So I'm ordering a new title to be drawn up. Congratulations, it's your house now. Which is why they got much tighter now on the document process. But
Right.
point being, like anytime if you don't properly execute a document, it voids a lot of the stuff. Now there's two questions, and I'd want to see. It's so new because we've never had a president do that, right? The only example I could think
There was
of,
never a thought that it would happen.
there's only one historical example, which was Woodrow Wilson after he had his strokes,
When his wife was
where his
essentially
wife
running
was
the
essentially
presidency.
running the government, and she still would like hold his hand as he signed things and
You mean
say
like how Carter was able to vote in this last
Yeah.
election?
so she would sign things, like it would be, the pen would be in his hand, and then she'd say that he was moving it. So that's the only
Well,
and
Bill brings up an interesting question. So, say one of those people that he pardoned that we don't know that they should have been pardoned, like somebody who murdered a number of people.
the victim's
Say
family
they
would
went
have
out
standing.
and committed another crime and harmed somebody, that would give them standing to question whether that person should have ever been out of prison in the first place.
Yeah, they would be able to do a civil action against the chief of staff who theoretically auto-penned the pardon. And I believe I could see a cause of action where they say, but for his illegal use of the auto pen, creating a pardon that was not actually proper, putting this person on the street, my loved one would still be alive, and or I wouldn't have been victimized, or I wouldn't have lost my property. So I am now suing this person for X number of dollars for real damages and punitive damages based on that. Now, part of discovery would be looking into the fact that whether he was the one who signed the document with an auto pen or whether Biden actually did it. Now,
And would that fall under executive privilege?
no, it wouldn't. because this would be an official executed document. Executive privilege is for discussions and back and forths. Like executive privilege is designed to make sure that advisors to the president don't have to hold back in their opinions when they're speaking to the president. That executive privilege is supposed to make sure that because some matters are so sensitive that their discussion can sometimes be very touchy, you don't want a chilling effect on advice getting to the president. What
Right.
executive
But in
privilege
discovery, all you're going to be able to get is that it was signed then. If you can't have any discussion, like executive privilege would apply to the discussion of, who is getting the pardon and why when it was being explained to Biden. Because
well
most of these things, even Trump has come out and said,
well
a lot of
yeah
the executive orders, they'll bring it to his desk and he asks for an explanation. What is in this? What am I actually signing?
well no
Give me the details of it.
that wouldn't be at all relevant to the grounds of action. Because the president's ability to do a pardon is plenary, you can't get into whether like the president could decide to pardon someone because he liked the cut of his jib, like
Yeah.
to use it's completely irrelevant why the president pardoned somebody. The question, and this would not be put up for executive privilege, is did a person who was not the president via use of the auto pen
Do it without
execute
the
the
knowledge
document?
of the president.
Because now if the president was aware of it and told them to use it, you could argue that he effectively signed it by doing that because he delegated it with full knowledge. So the question that would make it actionable would be saying that the chief of staff, without Biden's knowledge and approval, executed the document and published it as an official pardon of the United States by the
Yeah,
president.
I get it. It's just wild to me that on damn near anything you do on legal paperwork at like the normal citizen level, you have to have a notary public, witness and confirm it. And then there's somebody sitting in the White House who's just got essentially a rubber stamp with the president's name that can just say, he doesn't really need to see this. Click.
Yeah, I mean, should there be an official notary of the president? Probably, maybe.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
Now, if the executive signed off on it, that would make sense. I would think.
but then another executive comes in and they can just reverse it.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, because technically neither the judicial nor the congressional are able to put that kind of restriction on the president because it's not in the Constitution. You can't like suddenly change. Now,
Right.
the Constitution does say specifically the president, for the president's, like it gives some process things. This is all novel, which is interesting. Like in 200 now, almost 250
Yeah.
years of the United States, we've never had to worry about this. Like,
Because, well, even when you sign your name with a typewriter, you would then put a signature on it.
yep.
So
And,
it's not like somebody could just do it on your behalf.
Well,
Things were still signed.
This could go. I mean, the first person who effectively created an auto pen was Thomas Jefferson. He had a mock-up, but I think you can still see it in Montecito, where it was like a desk where it had a basically other, like, from his main pen that he would write with, there was on like operational arms where you could put other pages.
Right, where
there were quills that would complete. It was basically like like a Xerox machine, and it would like from his movements, it would mimic the exact movement. So as he signed one document, the other versions of the letter would be signed in whatever number. I think it was 3 or 4 pens were running at one time. That was almost an auto
what
pen.
people used to do with World of Warcraft, where they would chain 5 characters to the same keyboard and mouse, and it would copy the movements of the main character because it was all to the same thing.
Now, I would say from a legal standpoint, I could argue that was more legitimate than the use of the auto pen for the Biden administration, because at least in that case, this is Jefferson writing by his own hand, and those are just exact duplicate copies of what he made with his own hand. Whereas the auto pen has just a Biden's signature on file, and you hit the button and it signs the document for you.
Yeah.
It's again, it's super novel. I think it's worth having a discussion about because Jack Smith comes to mind. A lot of people just assumed that he was perfectly fine. And then there was like that percolating little thought process, like he wasn't confirmed by the Senate.
Right.
There's some rules about who can be an agent of the Department of Justice. And that percolating got all the way to Clarence Thomas, where
Does he have any legitimate power?
in a dissenting opinion that there's legitimate issues to look at regarding the appointment of the special counsel in this case, and if he has legitimate authority, which worked its way down to Judge Eileen Cannon, who used that as the basis to dismiss the case from the district court level in Florida. So even though this is all novel and I think it should work certain ways, it's never been tested. We've not had any smart lawyers come up with attack vectors on it. There's a lot of stuff where it could get in there. My thought initially is just the judiciary is going to be very hesitant to get involved. So I can see them dismissing lots of these things just based on standing. It was the same thing in 2020 with the court challenges regarding the election. You try to get Trump on the fact that, oh, all these courts ruled against him. None of them ever looked at evidence.
Right.
All they ever did was rule based on standing or saying the challenge was moot. So they never actually reviewed the evidence of malfeasance.
But Boosh, this is completely different. I mean, auto pin used for engraving, or like the chalkboard thing that our teachers used to use that would do 10 pieces of chalk to make 10 lines. Sure, that has been around. But a digital signature that you can just click and apply is completely different, in my opinion.
And again, that also means that on some operational level, the ones that are mimicking and making the additional copies are still just are being controlled by the person who's physically signing it, and it's just making a copy of them signing it, like while they're physically moving the pen. The auto pen is again hitting a button and it signs Joe Biden.
Digital signature is completely different.
Yeah, so that's because now I would even argue that you could say if Joe Biden, as Kamala would say, was the one hitting the button, like on a DocuSign version of those executive orders or pardons, it's legal and it's fine because we as a society have accepted now digital signatures if done by the people. As long as Biden, like if Biden was aware he was signing a pardon and hit the button, you're out of luck.
Yeah, you applying your digital signature is different than somebody else because that is essentially just it is somebody using your authority by binding it with your name. I mean, on every paper that we send out, even with like insurance, it's regulated. We can't do some things with, say, life insurance without having the person present and wet signature, like changing beneficiaries, because if somebody else can just e-sign it, you don't know if it's actually valid. There's not a whole lot of way to confirm that it's valid. And, with beneficiaries on life insurance, that can make for some very crazy legal challenges because, it's kind of like, did somebody actually change their will? That kind of thing. I did want to go back and get this because we did get a Rumble rant from Deeple a little bit ago. Ahoy all, I have completed my annual orbit around the great burning fireball in the sky today. Happy birthday, bud. It's also Austin 316 day, and I hope Trump and Doge whoop some ass today. Let's have a great day. I'm assuming that meant it's his birthday.
Nice.
So your anniversary, his birthday.
It's good stuff. It's easy to remember my anniversary because it's the day before St. Patrick's Day.
Yep, we do have that coming up, and
my official reminder to get
he's got his Miller time going.
Yeah, my official reminder to get an anniversary gift is the Shamrock Shake coming back to McDonald's.
Right.
If I see a Shamrock Shake ad, it's like, better get ready.
Was there anything else we wanted to touch on? Because we're pretty much at time. We're actually a little bit over.
Let's see. We
We
did.
can get the travel ban next time because we'll get the announcement of the 43 countries that he's
Yeah,
banning.
I don't think he's made that yet. Right? He's just
He's
it.
in the process of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because plus it'll
but
get.
it's
It,
rumored to include Russia.
I think that's the carrot. I mean, not the carrot, the stick to
The
try to get.
stick.
He wants Putin to, and Putin, I think, is ready to sign off on the deal. I think, in
He signaled
secret,
as such.
I think the Russians and the U.S. delegation have effectively already worked out what the deal's going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just waiting to make it go through the motions to do it. Now, Putin this week already said that he's good with the ceasefire, but he needs, what is it, Kirkuk, where the Ukrainians went into the Russian territory and they're currently getting annihilated now.
Right.
There's still several hundred plus soldiers there. He wants them to completely surrender, throw down their arms so they can be taken into custody. And he said he was willing
Which
to
he
listen.
does want them made prisoners.
He wants them charged under terrorism too, because they, for invading his
I don't
territory.
know that he's going to get that, but that
I
may be
think.
where
I
he's
mean,
starting at a high point and trying to bring it down like
well,
Trump
I think
does.
this is the part where he's going to be magnanimous, where he'll take them prisoner, and then once the official like ceasefire is done, they'll do a prisoner exchange, a
Right.
symbolic prisoner exchange. I mean, effectively, the deal is going to be that he gets to keep the he keeps Crimea, that becomes Russia. The Donbass kind of region becomes neutral but Russian aligned. There's going to be some probably slight neutral zone, very similar to the DMZ in North and South Korea. That is,
And a continuation of never allowed to join NATO.
and that's the thing. Like, Zelensky needs to get it through his goddamn thick skull. They're never getting into NATO. That's going to be a peace deal. And the European warmongers need to get it through their head that they are not getting Ukraine into NATO.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I'm still fine with us just pulling out of NATO after this is all done. And
I think
then
it's the right thing to do anyway.
they've got no, even if they were to bring Ukraine in at that point without the U.S. backing, there's no teeth there. I mean, NATO has no teeth without the U.S. being involved. So they've got no money. They've got nothing to enforce it. So I think getting the U.S. out of it in the next year is the play to go with after we get this situation resolved. So, howdy, culture.
Yeah, you better believe that'll save us some money too. That'll be part of the budget savings to do some things
Yeah.
if we don't have any NATO obligations. I mean, Trump
Or
is right.
UN.
We're underwriting Europe and Canada can say what they want. We underwrite their defense to hundreds of billions. I mean, they are under Pax Americana, to use the old Roman style Pax Romana, which is they are under Roman protection. They are under American protection. By doing that, when they talk about how America, well, your health outcomes are this, you don't have socialized healthcare, is like, yeah, because we have a military that protects the international waterways for everybody. There's only one blue water navy in the entire world. China's almost there, but the US is the only blue water navy that can project power over the entire planet.
Correct. I mean, and China being almost there is, they're not really almost there. I mean, they're putting out carriers, but I mean, their carriers are so behind ours at this point that, I mean, it has to be non-effective. But I don't know. People keep trying to pull China into the superpower talk, and China really does not have the same ability to, I mean, if you define superpower as the ability to basically make law amongst the rest of the world, China doesn't really have that ability. The US can make moves that actually force almost any other country in the world to make changes if they wanted to. And we've got the military to back it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would lump China definitely into the economic superpower zone because they are projecting economic power over a large swath of the world, but
Yep.
they are not a military superpower as of yet. I mean, they've had flare ups recently, even on the Indian Chinese border, where there's been some exchanges. There's issues with you know, their ability to actually move forces, deploy them, take territory. The one thing you can show that the United States military is capable of doing is putting boots on the ground throughout the
Right.
world. We've shown it
Which,
recently. We were operating in Afghanistan and Iraq with large volumes of troops. China now to their and it's you can argue whether it's smart or not. China hasn't projected military force in that way because it's expensive and a lot of times it doesn't get you a lot of gains.
well, especially them.
Yeah, so they've been using Belt and Road to use economic power, which is also very effective. It's why Trump has been in his first term and so far in his second. He realizes the most effective tool in the U.S. arsenal is our economic power, and using that to bend countries to our will to make it beneficial to our people is far better than trying to use it by deploying military force somewhere we have no interest in being.
Right. And then as far as Russia, I mean, this is all assuming that we're not going to go into a full nuclear, you know, situation. But Russia has proven just in the past 3 years with Ukraine that their military is not at the level that everybody thought it might be. They're a paper tiger when it comes to actual
See,
ground forces.
I don't know. I I disagree
They've
because
not been able to do much of anything in that
they
conflict.
they have Putin has been fighting minimal, like he hasn't used on purpose, and I think this was on purpose, the full breadth and width of his bombing capability and his ability to go after targets in Ukraine that if he wanted with air superiority. Now, we did put in Patriot missile systems and anti-aircraft systems that could make it a little more difficult, but they had the capability. Specifically, what I'm talking about is they could have targeted some of the major hydroelectric systems with large payloads rather than just drone attacks that were nuisance ones where the power would go out for hours but be restored. I think
Sure.
Putin made a point of trying not to go too far, partially because he wants to take the territory with infrastructure intact, if possible.
Right. That's a strategic decision.
That's a strategic, but that also means when you don't fight that way, your forces are
Handicapping
you're
yourself.
handicapping your forces in a way. So
Right, but he's
plus
going against handicap forces as well because while we've supplied them with quite a few things, and we haven't brought in like the U.S. military actual capabilities to repel what he could bring either.
we gave them a lot. They
We gave them a
have
lot. We didn't give them the good stuff.
Yeah, we did. We gave them
Some,
when we gave them the HMARs, when we gave them the missile defense systems, when we gave them the anti-aircraft systems. Effectively, Ukraine was only able to hold off the Russian advance because of Western, specifically American military capability. Like all those systems that were keeping the Russian tanks and Russian forces from being able to continually advance, they were all run by GPS systems that were part of the quote unquote intelligence sharing. We were effectively operating their artillery systems and
right,
long
like a
range
drone.
deterrence, drones and things. Those all operated because we allowed them to. You take the US out of this system and without our support, I think Putin would have rolled. Now,
It
this
would
the
have been
other
3 days,
thing.
like everybody said.
No, and here's the thing: Putin never said he was going to be there in 3 days. That got attributed to him, and because it was the statement of Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, where he said without our assistance, Putin could roll to Kiev, whatever they want to call it now, within
I'm still
3
going with
days.
Kiev.
Yeah, within 3 days. I don't think Putin's pragmatic Russian, studies history. Getting into a large land war where you have to hold territory is never fast. And if you take it fast, like the Americans
Shock
did
and awe.
in Iraq in 2003, then you get into sectarian violence where you get bled. And because people drop their, throw off their uniforms, blend into the civilian population, and then start just going after you. So I don't know that Putin ever thought it was going to be just 3 days and I'm done. I think
Well,
Putin,
it worked for him before.
yeah. So I wouldn't
Georgia
say
and Crimea.
Yeah, I don't think, but Putin, I haven't seen Putin put any, like, this whole idea that he has grand designs on Europe is stupid. He
Yeah, it's
doesn't,
absolutely retarded.
like, he's not going to try to take over those places. What Putin has always done is take the zones that he views as historically Russian territory.
Still
to
have primarily Russian-speaking citizens.
Yep, and that with most of Eastern Ukraine does. Like, I was watching some clips on YouTube the other day. It was Mila Kunis, the actress, right? She was
Yeah.
born in Ukraine, and she was talking about, like, and because it was on the Graham Norton show, and it was a funny clip where she's like, most people just come up to her and say, "Shut up, Meg," and it made me laugh. It was funny, but
Yeah.
in the lead up, she was talking about how she was born in Ukraine. Her family left Ukraine to the United States when she was young. And so he goes, "Oh, yeah, so you speak?" And she goes, "Yeah, I speak Russian.
Right.
I speak Russian to my grandparents, Russian with my parents, because that was our language." She's from Ukraine, but her native language was Russian.
Russian.
President Vladimir Zelensky, his native language, Russian. That's his primary first language is Russian. So these zones are, when he goes with Georgia, with Crimea and Eastern Ukraine, these are all territories. And when go back to that interview with Tucker Carlson, where Putin went back
The
600 years
history lesson
to give the history lesson, Putin wants to secure the borders of with the territory he views as Russian, with Russian people,
historically Russian,
that are historically Russian, and he views it as protecting. You got to look at it from his mindset. He actually, in addition to gaining power for himself, he legitimately views it as protecting the Russian ethno state and the peoples,
right, because
of
it's
Russia.
not about the former USSR, it's about former Russia.
Yeah, because a lot of the USSR was carved up to make artificial states to create more buffer countries. It was like, so it's it's funny.
No, Zelensky's primary language is grift.
Oh,
True.
well, no, that's just the language that he's best at.
That's the one he's gotten accustomed to using.
Yeah. And
anyway,
a couple bumps and some grift. That's what Zelensky does.
Yep. But we'll probably keep touching on that as we get closer to probably a full resolution of that conflict. So what do you got coming up?
We've got, I think we're both going to be on Mad's new channel on Tuesday for another one of his Mad Paps, as he calls them.
And he's actually already got it set up.
He's already got the live stream set up, so that's good for him. Then we've got the Ascendant Arc podcast next Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern. So if people want to go over there, at least drop a sub. If you could subscribe to the channel. We've got the watch hours. We're trying to get to that magic number 500 so we can get monetized, like our cool guy over here, Brahma. Maybe do memberships, super chats, all that fun stuff. So if you guys could, it costs you nothing. You don't even have to watch right now because we've already got the watch hours. If you're not already, if you could just subscribe to the Ascendant Art podcast here on YouTube, that would be awesome.
Yeah, everybody go give them the sub. I think most of the people here probably have, but there is a few people in here that we don't see every week, I think, or at least that we don't know are lurking every week. So, yeah, go give us an art sub. Give Mad's new channel, which is the name of Mad's new channel, a sub. As for me, I haven't decided yet whether in an hour I'm going to live stream or do a live watch along with the Avs versus Dallas, the return of Mikko Rantanen to the state of Colorado for the very interesting hockey game. But I think I may just watch it with my daughter on the couch. But this week we've got Comics Division on Monday. Tuesday is Mads. Wednesday, I believe we've got a Christian panel with Carrie Smith. And then I'll be on the midweek hump on the Shagsworth channel. Thursday, back with comics. Friday, Ascent and Art. Saturday, Bourbon and Boarding. And then we're back here. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hopefully that was a fun one. I think we got through just about everything except for maybe Voice of America.
Always so much news with this administration. It's so crazy.
60, 70 days in, and it's still just going completely nuts. So we try to hit everything that we can, but we also try to keep it down to about an hour and a half. So hope everybody has a great Sunday. We will catch you next time. I do have the chat set to raid over to George the Giant Slayer. I think he's still got about 30 minutes before he goes with his show, but it'll send you over there if you want to hang out in George's chat. Tell him we said hi. Have a great rest of your Sunday, everybody, and a good St. Patrick's Day. Later.
Bye.